Guess what, Lions? For as little as $5 a month, you can get access to exclusive bonus audio content and help this program grow by joining the Lions of Liberty Pride. To learn more, head over to lionsofliberty.com/support.
Marijuana is no more dangerous than alcohol. There's no reason why it should be illegal. And I always say to people, marijuana is dangerous because it's illegal. It's not illegal because it's dangerous.
Welcome to the Lions of Liberty podcast. Here's your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Claire.
Oh, hi, doggies. Kitties, lions, perhaps. Whatever esoteric animal form you are currently taking, I'm just glad to have you here listening to this program, the 335th episode of this program, which means you can find today's show notes over at lionsofliberty.com/335. And it's not just me, your host, your guide, your shining beacon of liberty, Marc Claire, every single Monday where I host interviews like the one you're going to hear today, as well as fun, somewhat drunken roundtable discussions with libertarians in living rooms drinking liquor like we did just last week. Be sure to go check that out. We had a blast on our breaking news edition of the show. But it's not just me. This coming Wednesday, you've also got Brian McWilliams, and every single Wednesday for that matter, when he brings you his weekly shot of comedy, culture, and liberty with Electric Liberty Land, as well as John Odie Odermatt wrapping things up every single Friday with his hard-hitting, dare I say, riveting look at the broken criminal justice system. Honestly, I love to toot my own horn, but Felony Friday right now might be the most important show on this podcast because of the personal stories that John is bringing out there to really show the injustices in the criminal justice system. It's very important to highlight that human element when we're reaching out to people, when we're trying to communicate ideas. So be sure to hit that subscribe button because you don't want to miss any of the great content coming out of here. Whether you listen on iTunes, Stitcher, Google, subscribe. You don't want to miss a thing. Now, before we get into today's interview, I do want to briefly discuss a little something we're trying to put together. Now, as many of you know, every single year, there is a huge libertarian event in New Hampshire, the Live Free or Die State, the home of the Free State Project, and that event is called PorcFest. And this is a huge gathering of all sorts of libertarians. There's a huge lineup already developing. I do know that Eric July, who's been a guest on this show, will be at PorcFest giving a speech as well as performing with his band Backwards. So it's going to be an awesome time, and we are trying to bring the Lions of Liberty to PorcFest. Now, our good friend Roger Paxton, the host of the Lava Flow podcast, he is actually in charge of PorcFest this year. He's the one that booked Eric July. He's trying to get us out there too, but we've got to reach our $1,000 a month Lions of Liberty Pride goal. Now, we're always talking about the Pride. We're always telling you about all the great content there, all the bonus podcasts that we have. We have the Conspiracy Corner. We have Degenerate Gamblers. We have bonus segments with great guests like Tom Woods, Scott Horton, Julie Borowski, Dave Smith, answering questions from Lions of Liberty Pride members, as well as an assortment of extra bonus podcasts. Of course, Brian does some drunken rants. He does his Rand Pluses and Minuses episodes. So much content. We also have the League of Liberty podcast with the aforementioned Roger Paxton, Chris Spangle of We Are Libertarians, and Johnny Rocket Adams of the Johnny Rocket Launchpad. Just loads of content in there. But besides the content, to me, the most important part of the Pride is how you get to interact with us and literally help us grow this show. We've recently put out a big ad campaign with the Part of the Problem show, with the Tom Woods show, and we've got a whole load of new listeners from that. So we really are using that money to make this show better, to expand our reach, and now we're using that money to try to travel and bring you some great content from the road. So our goal is to hit that $1,000 a month to trigger our purchase of our PorcFest tickets, our transportation, our hotels, everything we need to get to PorcFest and bring you some great content, because we're not just going there to party, although we plan to do that. We plan to mingle with libertarians. We're going to do a lot while we're there. We're going to set up a live podcast with any of our fans that are able to make it to PorcFest. They'll be able to be in studio with us, asking us questions, participating in the show. We also plan to do some sort of panel that we're discussing with some other podcasters, and we're also hoping to do a live edition of the League of Liberty podcast. So we have all sorts of stuff planned for you guys. You got to head over to PorcFest.com to learn more details. Now, you're definitely going to want to get an early bird ticket because right now prices are lower than they'll ever be. But on March 1st, all of those prices are going to go up. So be sure to go check out PorcFest.com, but also be sure to take a few minutes to consider tossing a few bucks our way, joining the Lions of Liberty Pride for as little as $5 a month. You can get access to all of our bonus content, as well as help us achieve these goals and bring you some really interesting content over the coming months and years, etc., etc. Because really, this is only the beginning. 2017 is the first year we started taking in money. We started being able to cover our own expenses, and now we're looking to do much more than that and really expand the kind of content we're able to provide you. We are getting very, very close right now, sitting just above $860 a month. So we just need a few more of you to sign up for the Pride, or for some of you to upgrade your membership. We just added a $15 a month level, which of course you get a free t-shirt, as everybody at the $10 and above level does, but you also get our daily news links email that Howie Snowden, our resident newsman, gathers every single morning. He's been doing this for us for years. That's where we get all of our news stories. Pretty much all the information that we talk about on this show comes from his news gathering abilities. He really has a knack for collecting liberty related news and stuff that's relevant to the type of things we talk about. So now the $15 and up members of the Pride get access to that daily email. So we are really working hard to bring you some great content and encourage you to help us bring you even more great content. We are very, very excited about it, just like I'm excited to talk to today's guest. My guest today is a Libertarian candidate for Congress in what is a very interesting special election coming up in Pennsylvania's 18th Congressional District. I'm pleased to welcome Mr. Drew Miller. Drew, are you ready to roar?
Let's do this.
All right. Now, Drew, like I said, you are in a pretty interesting election coming up here. It's a special election, and we'll get more into that in just a minute. But first, I want to find out a little bit more about you and how you kind of got where you are here. So why don't you start off telling us just how you first became interested in politics and libertarian ideas?
Sure. I'll start from the very beginning. So what happened was way back when I was in high school and in college, I would tell my friends, I sort of feel like I'm a little bit Republican. I sort of feel like I'm a little bit Democrat because I'm fiscally conservative, but socially liberal. And I just didn't know what that was. And when I was at Syracuse University, sitting in the Maxwell School of Citizenship and Public Affairs, our professor said to us, I want everyone to go and take the political compass quiz. And this will tell you where you fall on the political compass. So I took that quiz, and it turns out I was a hardcore libertarian. And that's the day I discovered that I actually was a libertarian. So it just kind of unfolded from there. And then from Syracuse, I went to law school at the Widener University School of Law in Harrisburg, where they really were heavily focused on having the students graduate and then go into some sort of government-based law, because that's what they were really well known for. So after law school, I went and started working for the Senate of Pennsylvania for a Republican senator who was at that time the majority whip of the Pennsylvania Senate. And it was an eye-opening experience for me because I realized how much power and influence the Republican Party had on the elected officials, and also how much influence the Democratic Party had on the particular individuals. So that's basically how I got into this. And then I just became a part of the Libertarian Party. And then when Tim Murphy had to resign, and as a background for maybe people who don't know, Tim Murphy at that particular time was the staunchest supporter of pro-life causes in Congress. And then what happened was he got his mistress pregnant, and then he asked her to have an abortion. And he did this via text message. There's a record of it. And when that came out, he was disgraced and he had to resign. So that left a vacant seat. And when I went to the Republican Party meeting, they said, we're going to hold a caucus to nominate somebody. They nominated me. They had a vote, and they unanimously selected me to be their candidate. And that's how I got to this point.
That example of Tim Murphy is a pretty good example of a lot of the hypocrisy we see in government and a lot of elected officials overall. Tim Murphy made his career as a pro-life politician. Now, the scandal you mentioned about, knocking up the mistress and the abortion, that might hurt a regular politician who didn't hold pro-life views, but they might survive, I think, if you had, different circumstances. But when someone is so staunchly pro-life and has based their own career around that, and then has something like this come up, I mean, there's just no hope for them.
No, that's exactly right. And that's what I've been telling everyone is that had he just been a regular politician, I don't think this would have hurt him as much. But the fact that he was the most outspoken pro-life supporter shows that he had to resign just due to the hypocrisy.
Right. I mean, even right now, we have this whole thing coming up with Donald Trump and his supposed affair with Stormy Daniels, this porn star. It may be true, it may not be, but either way, I don't think it's going to hurt Trump at all, because everyone at home in reality would go, oh yeah, I could see him doing that. Because that's not something that anyone has really judged Trump on other than his opponents. So I don't think something like that hurts somebody like Trump, whereas, it's a different situation with Tim Murphy.
Right. That is absolutely correct. I don't think this is going to hurt Donald Trump at all, actually, in the long run.
So let's go back a little bit here. So what exactly inspired you? Obviously, that vacancy came up, but had you been thinking about running for office before that? I mean, what really got your juices flowing and wanting to run for Congress under the Libertarian banner?
Well, for me, what it was every time I'd walk into the voting booth, it'd always be a disheartening type of situation, because you'd walk in and you should have a lot of options. That's what creates like a great democracy, is the ability to be able to choose who you want to represent you. And more often than not, I walk into a voting booth and I have one option, and at the very most, really two options on a good day. So I wanted to give people this option to have a third party option other than the two major parties. And in fact, this will be the first time in over 18 years that the 18th Congressional District will have a third party to choose from on the ballot for a congressman. And it could be longer than 18 years, but I've only been able to find the records for the past 18 years. So it's really exciting to think that I'm going to be able to give people this opportunity to choose something other than a Republican or a Democrat if they wanted to do that.
Tell us a little bit more about what's going on with this election. Obviously, it's a special election because the seat was vacated, but it's actually very interesting because the election, I believe it's mid-March sometime. I'm not sure the exact date off the top of my head, but I believe just 2 months after that, whoever wins would have to once again get their party's nomination in May, and then once again run for office in November. So this is a very short-term, election here. And I don't know if you've used this on the campaign trail at all, but it's almost like, hey, it's only for 6 months. You may as well give the Libertarian a shot. I mean, that's kind of a spin I would use.
No, that is exactly. In fact, I actually just brought that point up. I was just interviewed yesterday on PCN, which is a Pennsylvania cable network channel. And I basically said that. But here's the thing. This election is so crazy because there's even more happening in addition to that. So like you said before, yes, correct. The special election will be taking place on March 13th to finish out Tim Murphy's term, which would end this year. So the person who wins on March 13th, if it's a Republican or a Democrat, has to go on and then win the primary in May, and then go on and win the general election in November. And I say Republican or Democrat because the Libertarians, as you know, being a minor party, they don't have primaries in Pennsylvania. The other thing that's really interesting is right before this happened, there was a Pennsylvania Supreme Court case that took place. The League of Women Voters sued Pennsylvania because they said the districts in Pennsylvania were gerrymandered in such a way that they were unconstitutional. The Supreme Court of Pennsylvania agreed with them, and they said that the congressional districts within Pennsylvania have to be redrawn, except for the 18th district while the election is taking place. So immediately after the election takes place, and this is the special election, then the districts has to be redrawn. So it's possible that whoever gets elected might not even be living or representing that particular district. And in fact, I just learned that the Democratic candidate, Connor Lamb, will be completely carved out of the district. Now, I should say also, too, that I live outside the district, and I always have to begin with anyway. but I live right on the border of the district, just across the other side. But I used to work inside the district, so it's not like I don't know the 18th district. I know the needs of the 18th district. But like I said, the Constitution does require that you actually live in the district. And in fact, there are between 20 and 25 members of Congress who don't live in the districts they represent. But it's just a very interesting election in that regard.
Yeah, that is really interesting. So you're saying you don't need to live in the district in order to represent it?
Right. So for Congress, you don't need to. Yeah. So if you want to run as representative in Washington, you don't need to live in the particular district.
I assume you at least need to live in Pennsylvania.
You have to live in Pennsylvania, but that's about it.
That's weird. That's really interesting. And I assume this wouldn't really work for most politicians, but in theory, you could live, halfway across the state and run to represent that district, it sounds like.
You could. There's nothing really stopping you. I think it's like you have to be. I think it's 25 years of age, and then you have to live in, or be a resident, be a citizen of the United States, and be living here for. I think it was like 7 years or something like that. But yeah, so there really isn't too many barriers for people to actually be a congressman.
Drew, tell us a little bit more about your time working. I believe you said you worked in the Pennsylvania Senate under Republicans, and you mentioned you saw a lot of control that it sounded like the parties themselves, more as like an entity, were influencing the politicians in what you'd see as a corrupt or undue way. Can you get into some specifics there? Like what sort of actions did you see these organizations, both parties, taking that would sort of, direct the politicians in a way that wasn't necessarily in the best interest of their constituency or the people that they're supposed to represent?
Well, I'll tell you my personal story, and it made, I don't know if it made national headlines, but maybe it definitely made state headlines. So what happened was I was working for a woman who I said before was the majority whip of the Pennsylvania Senate. At that point, she would have been, I think it was the second most powerful woman in Pennsylvania at that time. And there was such a need to win these elections and really beat out the other side. So if you're Republican, you wanted to beat the Democrat, whoever it was. And they did this at any expense. And what happened was one day I was sitting in my office, and we have several offices because it was a big district. So I was up in north of the northern part of our district. And a reporter from the Pittsburgh Tribune Review came into my office, and he said, "I'd like to talk to someone about what's going on in your McKnight office," which was south of me. And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, you haven't heard. The district attorney just raided your office. They confiscated all of your computers, and it's likely that your boss is going to be going to jail." So as it turns out, my boss was using taxpayer-funded staff to do campaign work, which I didn't know that was going on. And so when that news broke, she ended up getting taken away in handcuffs. I had to actually go and testify against her at her trial to say what I had seen, which really wasn't that much because I was in a different office. This was all taking place in the office that was south of us. But her sister was a Supreme Court justice in Pennsylvania. She got tied up with this too, and she ended up getting kicked off of the Supreme Court, and both of those women lost their law license and will never be able to practice law in Pennsylvania again. So it was a huge corruption scandal, and unfortunately in Pennsylvania, there are so many stories like that. There have been so many elected officials that have gone to jail just because there is that need to constantly win. I think they allow the power and this need for power and to go to their heads. So it's like they're representing the parties, they're not representing the people, which is who they should be representing.
Well, Drew, I got to ask, because that does kind of beg the question, if you did somehow pull off the long shot victory here and win this very strange, very special election, what's to stop you from being corrupted by these same influences? The
thing that I always say to people is that the Republicans and Democrats, both of my opponents, have been receiving over $1 million in these elections in terms of like just the amount of money that's been going into advertising. And I haven't received really anything from the Libertarian Party yet, either at the national level or even from Pennsylvania. There have been a couple of people that have donated, members themselves here and there to me, but it hasn't been anything big. And so that's first the first thing. But the other thing is it's just like inside of me, I just have this feeling that really what our country is all about is having this representative government, this constitutional republic, this idea where you can go to someone who represents you and allow your concerns to be heard and allow them to be your mouthpiece, And I think that if we allow parties to undermine that, it really ruins the whole system. In fact, it's interesting because I was just thinking about this the other day. George Washington, 221 years ago, gave his final address to Congress. And in his final address, he said, I want to warn you guys that I have some major concerns about this party system we have here in this country. And he said that if we allow these parties to become too powerful, they're actually going to undermine everything that we've worked so hard to create as a country. And here we are, 221 years later, at the threshold of Washington's premonition. And so for me, it just goes to my core value. We can never allow something like that to happen. It always, the government always has to represent the people, can never just represent parties.
Drew, I'm wondering, due to the unique nature of this election and the short amount of time whoever this is would be in office, I'm wondering if that has given you sort of an edge in getting any extra media attention. I mean, obviously, we know that third parties are generally ignored for the most part, but have you seen that in your case to be any different? Or are you kind of getting what a lot of third parties, and especially libertarians, tend to get, which is just essentially being ignored?
No, that is what is so crazy, is that this is an election that's going to have probably national attention. And even in the Pittsburgh market, almost every news outlet is reporting that there are only two candidates, and it's just driving me crazy. So I'm having to take, my free time to contact all these news organizations and say to them, hey, could you revise your story to inform your voters that there are in fact three candidates? There's really only one newspaper in the region that has consistently reported that there are three candidates. And as I said, as of last night, when I was on PCN, that was the first time that I really had any type of media exposure, which is unfortunate. And here's the thing that I tell people is that I'm not just a fringe candidate. When you take a look at all three of the candidates, I'm actually the most qualified person to be on this ballot. And here's the reason why. The Democrat Conor Lamb, yes, he is a fellow attorney. I think he respects the Constitution, but he doesn't have that legislative experience in the legislative branch of government like I've had. And yes, Rick Saccone is a state representative, and he has that legislative experience, but he doesn't have that legal background, and he doesn't have that knowledge of the Constitution. In fact, in 2012, he tried to make 2012 the year of the Holy Bible, which leads me to believe that he doesn't have a grasp on the First Amendment, the separation of church and state.
Wait, he tried to make legislatively? He tried to make 2012 the year of the Bible?
The year of the Holy Bible, yeah. And he also tried to advocate and create legislation to allow for prayer at the beginning of school. So he just, and he's a very scary individual. In fact, I mentioned this, and I'm the only one who mentioned this. For some reason, his Democratic opponent has not brought this up, but there are allegations that he personally went over to Abu Ghraib and tortured the prisoners over there. So this is a guy
personally
who goes
went over and tortured them?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. He was in the army, or I don't know if it's the army, but he's definitely in the armed forces. And there's a book he wrote about it. I guess they brought him over, and he personally tortured those prisoners over there. So, and this is the guy that's going around talking about, what a great Christian he is. I just think there's a disconnect. I don't think you can call yourself a Christian and talk about how much you love torturing human beings, And there's also allegations that from there he went to Guantanamo Bay and did the same thing where he was waterboarding prisoners.
Wow. Jeez. So, I mean, Drew, it sounds like you've got a lot of great talking points, not only to talk yourself up, but also some points against your opponents here. So what's your strategy here? You've just got a little under a month until this election occurs. What's your strategy to wedge yourself in there to get more of that media attention, to get your name out there? Obviously, I imagine you're doing a lot of door-to-door and pounding the pavement and that sort of thing.
Yeah, and what I've done is I've gone exclusively to high schools and colleges because I found that the young people are the ones that are the most receptive to my message. And for me, it's just exciting to get the young people excited about voting. People always say, oh, young people, they don't care about the political process. They don't come out and vote. in the numbers that the senior citizens vote in, but that's only because we've never given young people a reason to vote. And so what I'm doing is I'm energizing these young voters. I've had a whole bunch sign up for my campaign to help me out. And I think what we're going to see is a large number of young voters come out on March 13th and vote for me. So it's really exciting for me. That's what I'm doing now. I'm also just trying to get as much attention as I can via grassroots and social media, and then I'm going to be going out within the next week and putting out more yard signs so people can see them. But like I said, the Republicans and the Democrats are definitely outfunding me. They have millions of dollars. I just don't have that kind of money to spend on commercials and whatever. So it's been challenging for me, but I'm working through it. I think I might even write an open letter to the news organizations and say to them, like, hey, you have a responsibility to report fairly and accurately on this election. And when you tell the viewers that there are only two candidates, or imply that there are only two candidates, you're not helping to create an informed electorate,
Drew, when you're out there on the campaign trail, and you said you've made a lot of headway with sort of the younger crowd, I'm curious, what are the issues that get you the most fired up? What really are you the most passionate about talking about and about connecting with those younger voters, or really anybody you might encounter in the district?
Well, this is going to sound strange. One of my biggest issues right now is the legalization of marijuana for recreational use on a federal level. And the reason I think that's important now is in Pennsylvania, we just recently passed medical marijuana legislation. But the problem with that is, as you know, it's still illegal at the federal level. And what's happening is that when people try to go and purchase a handgun, they legally cannot be able to do that because on the ATF form, they ask you if you are a marijuana user. So if you have this marijuana ID card, this medical marijuana ID card, you can't truthfully answer that question and say that you do not use marijuana. So this is actually infringing upon our Second Amendment rights, and we can't allow anything to infringe upon our Second Amendment rights. So I think one way to resolve that issue would be to legalize marijuana on a federal level for recreational purposes. I think that's the best way to go about doing that. Plus, as a libertarian, I've always said that it's not the government's responsibility to tell us what's in our best interest. We are adults. We have to decide what's in our best interest. So, we take into consideration that marijuana is no more dangerous than alcohol. There's no reason why it should be illegal. And I always say to people, marijuana is dangerous because it's illegal. It's not illegal because it's dangerous.
That's a really good tagline, by the way. Have you heard of any cases of that actually occurring in Pennsylvania? I know a few weeks ago there was sort of something in Hawaii where a sheriff said, we're going to confiscate your guns, or you have to turn in your guns if you're also a marijuana user. They kind of rescinded on that. And I know that legally, technically by the book, like you're saying, it is federally illegal, so they could deny you a gun permit. But have you actually heard of anybody actually running into this issue?
I haven't heard of it yet, but the fact that it exists is an issue, and we can't allow something like that to exist. So I think that if you take a look at what's happening in the country, look, Colorado has legalized marijuana for recreational use. A lot of other states have done it too. I think it's all moving in that direction. I think the idea of medical marijuana is just a pretext to sort of get people warmed up to the idea of recreational marijuana. It's going to happen eventually. I really believe that. You can sort of see it in the distance. Like, I believe that one day we're going to see marijuana legalized across the nation for recreational use. And if that happens, not only will that be great for liberty, but it will also be great on an economic scale too, because I just read an article, it was a Business Insider, that said by 2025, if we legalize marijuana on a federal level for recreational purposes, it'll bring in, I think it was $130 billion per year and provide for 1.1 million jobs related to that industry.
Hey guys, you might remember that I recently said that this is the libertarian moment and that we need more people to stand up and run for office. Now, if you're tired of watching liberty erode and you plan to stand up and run for office, I want you to call on a team that has over 20 years experience, Global Alliance Communications. They specialize in data analytics, identifying and mobilizing voters. They offer live voter outreach, data acquisition, compliance, recorded messages, text messaging with full social media touchpoints, and teletown halls. Campaigns of all types and sizes are encouraged to reach out, and you can find out more by visiting their website at www.gacigroup.com or email info@gacigroup.com.
Drew, one thing I want to ask you about is what is your goal of the campaign here? Because as you discussed, and as we all know, the odds are absolutely stacked against you in so many ways, from media bias, media ignoring you, just the sheer difference in the money that you're not receiving, as opposed to your opponents, who are both heavily funded. So are you seeing this as sort of an educational campaign, or do you think that due to the unique nature of this election, if you play your cards right, you might have a shot to actually win this election, or at least influence it in a way that can have some sort of real world pragmatic impact?
Yeah, and for me, I think I'm the only one that really believes I can win this election, just based on the fact that the two other candidates are really not strong candidates. The fact that I have a more impressive resume than either of them combined. It's the fact that I'm not a fringe candidate, the fact that people are so tired of divisive politics. And I think people have to understand that, everyone across the nation is saying it. They're like, oh, we're just really upset with the Republicans and the Democrats and how divisive, this political climate has become. And each of the candidates is saying, oh, well, I'm going to reform Washington. Well, you can't expect a Republican or a Democrat to fix a problem that's caused by Republicans and Democrats. Only a third party can do that. And I really think that if I got the media attention, if I got more recognition within the media, and we're able to have the ability to advertise in the same way that the Republicans and Democrats do, I really think I could win this election, especially if you look at the polling numbers, there's still 20% of the voters who have no idea yet who they're going to vote for. And I think those are the people who are looking for that third party option. And I think there are a lot of people on both the Democratic and Republican sides that are also looking for another option. So I think that if they know that I'm out there, I really think I could win this election. If I don't win this election, what I really want to do is make sure that I get the libertarian message out there. And by going to these high schools and colleges, I'm really helping that to happen. You can see, it's almost as if a switch turns on in these kids' heads when they, hear me speak, and I am presenting ideas that resonate with them, which is great. So I might be, creating new leaders in the future who will eventually become elected as libertarians. So for me, that's exciting.
Absolutely. I mean, just look at Ron Paul. He was one of the few people that happened to be able to really do both, to campaign as a libertarian and spread that message, but also to win his own election. So it's certainly not impossible. But I think the bigger impact that he had, it was less so his time spent in Congress and more so his time campaigning, both for Congress and through his presidential elections. Because, I mean, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now if it wasn't for Ron Paul, most likely, because he in many ways inspired myself and my fellow Lions of Liberty to come together and form this podcast. So what you're talking about there is really the bigger issue here. I mean, it would be amazing if you could win this election, and it's certainly not impossible. Crazier things have happened. Look who the president is. But the fact that you're actually out there discussing these issues with the younger generation and focusing on people that are more open-minded, that are more open to hearing this message, I think is a wonderful thing. And hopefully some of these kids, maybe some of these high school kids you're talking to aren't even eligible to vote, but maybe they're going home and having a conversation over dinner with mom and dad and bringing up these crazy libertarian ideas. And maybe a few of those, I'm sure they get a lot of eye rolls too if they're anything like my parents. But hopefully it does start to get some of the older folks thinking a little bit as well, if they see their children being influenced and asking questions and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I hope so too. You mentioned Ron Paul, and it's interesting because I posted yesterday on my Facebook page that yesterday was the 9th anniversary of Ron Paul's "What If" speech to Congress that he gave, where he basically almost predicted the future. Where he says, what, he basically said, Madam President, what if, and then he would give these different scenarios, and all of them potentially, actually, almost all of them came true. So yeah, he definitely had a huge impact. But in this particular election, if nothing else, I would love to be a spoiler for one of the other candidates. I think if that happens, where the reporters could say, were it not for Drew Miller, maybe this other candidate would have won, but he took all these votes away from one candidate, and that allowed the other candidate to win. I think if we do that, the two parties are going to realize they have a major issue on their hands.
Right, and even in that case, if nothing else, then in the future they're going to have to, if you run again, or if someone else likes you runs again, they're going to have to address some of these issues that you bring up, if for nothing else, than to win those votes back.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. So hopefully that's what I'm going for. And it's really very possible that's going to happen, because this election right now is so close that it's basically a dead heat. But what's interesting is that none of the candidates are getting over 50% of the vote. So they're both getting about that 40% vote, and there's still that other 20% out there that's undecided. So it's going to be a very interesting election.
Well, it's almost like the best thing that could happen to you, other than outright winning the election, would be to take 3% of a vote where the swing was 2%. It's something like that, where you will get attention. You will be called a spoiler. You will be called many, many names by the losing side. But that's the kind of attention you want to bring to not just yourself, but the Libertarian Party and libertarian ideas overall.
Right, and that is completely fine by me too. If I, ruin this election for one of these candidates, I won't be too sad. I'll be able to go to sleep at night, even though it's would be terrifying, I think, to have either one of them in office. But if I'm able to do it, I think that'd be a great thing for the party to know that we are really serious contenders now.
All right, Drew. Well, I'm certainly find your campaign interesting. My friend John Odermatt, he's worked with you and some other people in Pennsylvania and in the Libertarian Party, and he's very excited about your campaign. He got me excited about your campaign, and after speaking to you, I'm pretty darn excited about it as well. And I think many of our listeners, especially, I know we have a pretty good contingent out there in Pennsylvania, so hopefully they'll be sending you some of their dollars, sending you some of their attention, that sort of thing. So why don't you just let everybody out there know where can they find more information about your campaign? I know you have to do something special with your name there, so you're not confused with somebody else. So why don't you just tell everybody where they can find your campaign, how they can help, how they can get directly involved, especially if they are out there in Pennsylvania?
Sure. If you go to my website, drewgraymiller.com, and that's Gray, Gray, you can see a donation button right on my front page. There's also a contact form that you can fill out your information and send it to me. And within about a day or two, I'll be in contact with you to tell you how you can help with my campaign. But I basically need as much help as I can, because this is a grassroots effort. And like I said, I don't have the money that the other two parties have. But I think if we all work together, we definitely can win this election.
All right, that's Drew Gray Miller, not to be confused with the hockey player, Drew Miller. Very important distinction. Drew, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show, and I truly do wish you the best of luck with this election. I'm very excited to see how it all plays out.
Great. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thanks, Drew. All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed my conversation there with Drew Gray Miller. That special election coming up very, very soon. Now, there is actually a debate that's taking place, tonight, if you're listening to the episode today, and Drew has not been invited to that debate, but he has been causing a little bit of a ruckus about this and going out and reaching out to the news media. We've been having some people in the forum actually comment on their websites, on their Facebook pages locally there, and mention, hey, where's Drew Miller? Where's the Libertarian candidate? Because I like the scrappy ones, when it comes to liberty, when it comes to fighting for principles, I like the ones that get out there and get in the mix of things. And I'm glad we've got Drew Miller out there as a voice for liberty, talking about the issues that neither of these candidates are going to be talking about. Yeah, there's not a great chance he's going to just come out of nowhere and win this election based on the odds. But there is a good chance that he can reach people and get them thinking about things differently, getting them thinking about politics differently and how they view the role of government. And that's why I do this show. That's why we have these conversations here. That's why we do these interviews. That's why we're looking to expand this program always at all times, whether it's the content that we're trying to provide you by going to PorcFest. Of course, as I went through all that at the beginning of the show, I won't do it all again. Rather, I will just remind you to head over to lionsofliberty.com/support to learn more about the Pride, or you can give us a one-time donation either via PayPal. There's a link on the homepage at lionsofliberty.com to do that, or you can send us one of a variety of cryptocurrencies by heading over to lionsofliberty.com/donate. donate. And I also want to encourage you to come over and join the conversation. Now, we have a private Facebook group for our Lions of Liberty Pride members, a secret group that only they are allowed in to give us questions for the show, give us suggestions and that kind of thing. But we have some great conversations in our forum, the Lions of Liberty forum on Facebook, that is more open to everybody. It's pretty much open to anybody who is interested in the show or wants to engage in the conversation. And I got to say, it's really one of the better, more respectful forums out there, especially as many of you know, out there in Liberty Land, it can get a little crazy. It can get a little tense. Things can get weird, but things might get weird sometimes in the Lions of Liberty forum too. But we tend to have some really great, productive conversations over there. So I want to encourage any of you on Facebook to just type Lions of Liberty forum in your little search bar and come on over and join the conversation. Guys, don't forget to continue tuning into this very podcast feed this coming Wednesday when Brian McWilliams brings you his weekly shot of culture, comedy, and liberty. And of course, wrap things up on Friday with John Odermatt's weekly look at the broken criminal justice system on Felony Friday. Until next week, folks, live long and live free.